So well done. Now we've got your attention and your full energy. Please, now have a round of applause and welcome our speaker for the next sessions for business messaging, which will be Catalin Barea, the Senior Director of Product Management at NetNumber. Now, we're talking about opt-in and what's the concept of mastering opt-in, but it's more behind it. I think you've got a presentation now, and I will leave you alone, but I will come back with your questions and my questions for following up. So right now, Catalin, your floor.
Thank you. It will be difficult to make it that entertaining after the quiz, but I'll try. So we're going to speak about opt-in management, and I'm by no means an expert in opt-ins. I think many of the rooms are, but what I know is that the environment is definitely fragmented. So there are so many rules and regulations depending on the country that you're operating, from GDPR in Europe to the e-privacy directive, the CAN-SPAM Act in the US, MMA guidelines North America, CSSL wherever it is, and the CTI messaging principles again in the US. So this can be really complicated and different requirements how personal data has to be collected and managed. What I want to speak specifically about today is phone numbers, because as part of the opt-in processes, as long as the communication happens over a mobile channel, the brands, the enterprises will collect phone numbers, and then those phone numbers have to be subject to these laws and regulations. And what happens is that they can come either incorrect or they can age. So I put some statistics here. If you take the US as a benchmark, 10% of the phone numbers that are active in the US number plan, they are getting ported in between the operators every year. So unless the data is managed well, it kind of ages over time. And again, there is a requirement in the US specifically that when a user ports from one operator to another, then they have to be unsubscribed from certain services. Even before the data aging, it can come incorrectly from the very beginning. So this also depends, on the enterprise and the way they are collecting and validating the data. But some recent statistics that we've looked at, they are showing that up to 20% of the phone numbers provided by end users can be incorrect, and this can be for a variety of reasons, from a typo to users intentionally providing wrong numbers with the intention of creating accounts that it can use for misbehavior, spam, and stuff like that. So all this speaks about the importance of properly looking at the different steps in the lifecycle management of opt-ins and how the data can be correctly collected from the very beginning when it comes to phone numbers, but also how the data can be managed through the process and aged out or corrected when it's no longer valid. So really simple here. The data gets collected, it gets maintained, it gets removed. What does it mean? What needs to happen at each stage in the process? So in the very beginning, if a user is providing a phone number, is the enterprise checking if that phone number is even valid, or do they take it for granted? Or even if it's a valid number, was it maybe recently associated with fraud activity that would indicate that the respective user has some bad intentions as to what they want to do on the respective platform or service? When it comes to the in-life part of the process, even if the phone numbers continue to be valid, but are those users maybe victims of account takeover fraud? So was the number subject to a SIM swap recently, or was a number subject to a porting event to another operator? These are things that indicate that specific financial transactions, specific account activities might be at risk, and the enterprise should introduce additional checks for those transactions to make sure the user account takeover doesn't negatively impact the potential victim. And then last but not least, the data, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of ages out. So maybe it gets ported to another operator, maybe it gets simply disconnected. The user moves to another service, another operator with a new number. And then are the opt-ins that were initially provided still valid for those phone numbers? And the answer is typically no, and those users have to be removed from the opt-in list, and then new opt-in needs to be collected from them. So really, high level, don't want to spend a lot of time on our portfolio, but kind of, there are different solutions in the market, different services that can help with this type of data analysis and collection through the entire process. And that concludes the slides. Thank you.
little cue for me to come back.
Yeah.
And so let's sit down and let's have a little chat. And this is where we also invite you, if you're following online or here in the room, to come and share your experience, your questions. Because, Kathleen, we have focused a lot on the first part of your 3 boxes we've seen there, on the opt-in. And there was a lot of pressure to say, remember, you need to get your opt-in. We probably didn't speak or spend enough time on the other 2 boxes of what do you do once you have this opt-in? And what do you do afterwards? How do you look at the life cycle? And some of that seems to be all about the difference between the designing principles and then leaving it. So let's get back and to some of your experiences, some of the things you've done over there. Can you share what happens in reality? What's happening out there? To these numbers, to this great collection of numbers? What are the things that can happen to them?
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at these numbers, there are things that are market specific. There are things that are, enterprise specific. So the market specific things are the numbers get imported. These are, you have markets that are pretty stable, a lot of postpaid plans, and then you don't see a lot of portability. But you also have markets out there that are very much skewed towards prepaid subscribers, getting the best offer. They don't care so much about keeping the existing phone numbers as long as they get more data in their bundle and a cheaper price. And then, country by country, you can look and you see, maybe here 5% of the numbers get turned over every year. Maybe here 20, 30, 40% of the numbers get turned on every year. So this is the marketing, the market aspect. The enterprise aspect, that's really specific to their own, I would say, business processes and their user profile, is the quality of the phone numbers that get provided in the first place. Do they even validate phone numbers before collecting them? Do they check, the format or maybe even more advanced verifications as to the validity of the phone numbers? Do they check the possession of the phone numbers by sending a one-time password to validate that the user claiming the phone number actually has possession of that phone number or not? Because this can make a huge difference. And at one extreme you can see enterprises owning very high quality data, pretty close to 0% errors, if I can say that. But you can also see the other extreme where 50% of the numbers that they provide can be invalid because they were not properly verified from the onset.
And if I have to look at your experience, where are we between these 0 to 50%?
We've seen both extremes, so both are numbers that I've seen recently. I would say, yeah, the average is around that 20% that you've seen on that on the slide earlier. But yeah, you can see definite extremes to, both extremes.
Now, in your slides, you shared something that I thought was interesting. Maybe it's almost a philosophical question, maybe. But how many people would insert the phone number? Sometimes it would be misspelling, miswriting the number. But is there an intent to cover the identity, to keep a wrong phone number so that you don't have to receive a message and so on?
Yeah.
Is there fraud inserted by the users, or fraud, or pretense of the number by the user or something?
It's both. I mean, the occasional typo can happen, but you definitely have users with bad intentions out there that are looking to exploit insufficient verification practices to create fake accounts, and then this can be vehicles for spam. They can be vehicles for different spam comments on different mobile platforms. Whenever there is an easy way to create a fake account, then that will be exploited. And this goes even back to the artificial traffic inflation and traffic generation. If there is an easy way to create those fake accounts and generate that incremental traffic, then there will be people out there exploiting these vulnerabilities.
Interesting. And here is the user itself, but sometimes by wanting to protect themselves from potentially receiving messages, and messages are not wanted, they might give somebody else numbers, and that's going to generate spam for them.
Correct.
So that we have a mechanism. At the end of it, it seems to be still we have an issue with trust. Do people trust giving the numbers away? So we still, as an ecosystem, have to somehow look after it. But okay, let's do a little game, if you don't mind. We just had the mastermind, so you didn't know about that. But I'm going to ask you a question. Don't answer it yet. But the question is, we've seen the 20%. But how long does it take, to reach the, your midlife point for your 100 million of contacts that you have in your database? How long would it take for them to be only 50 of them left? But before you answer that, let's see if any of you would like to, after the mastermind energies and all the coffee and chocolate that you have now, would any of you like to venture? Shout out, or if you know, write it on the chat and somebody will tell us if you're online. How long would it take, do you think, to deteriorate your database, if you're an enterprise, to 50% of it? Raise your hands if you think it's going to be less than 6 months. We got one person, two persons with less than 6 months, or three of them. Less than a year. Oh, one, two there, okay. Less than 2 years before it reaches 50%. So go one over there, two, okay, so let's go. Still kind of equally spread, so well done. Okay, less than 5 years, how long does it take? Raise your hands. Oh, we got one, I can see two, three. Okay, well, you're well equally proportional. Less than 10 years, anybody? Oh, got one person, two persons, less than 10 years. Now, you have some data, do you? So I'm asking
Yes.
you. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I just have one. So who potentially got it, right, based on your data? How long does it take?
Yeah, pretty much everyone. Yeah, it would depend.
Well done to all of you.
No, definitely. I mean, it would depend on the type of data and how good it was in the first place and what the dynamics are there. Like I said, it's often a function of the specific processes of an enterprise and how they deal with it. It can be anywhere from some months to maybe a couple of years. But that's not even the point, because if you're a brand, you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to wait until my data is only half as valuable as it was in the beginning. You actually want to keep it to the highest level of quality throughout the entire life cycle of whatever you're doing to communicate with those users. And this is why it's super important to keep it on shape. Don't refresh it once every 3 years. Don't refresh it every 6 months. Keep it in shape. And as these mobile subscribers change behavior, switch to operators, disconnect, get new subscriptions or whatever, this is data that is available in real time in the ecosystem. There are different solutions to deal with that and to manage with that. So these are real-time services that can be used to keep the data in shape continuously. And another point that I would like to bring here is that it depends again on the market. But if we take the US for an example, and the TCPA, Telecommunication Compliance Act, even one single spam message sent out can be $1,500 fine. So multiply that by a couple of hundreds of thousands or millions of messages that were sent incorrectly to subscribers because the opt-in was not observed. They were not removed from the opt-in list when they shouldn't be contacted anymore, and that can be pretty expensive pretty soon.
Well, okay, so we've learned that the half-life is one indicator, but realistically, treat it also, I would say, as a leaking bucket. You might add more numbers, but if so many of them are wrong, and if you don't look after it, you need to have an entire thing in place to keep it fresh and proper. Okay, so let's move to more of a real life stories. What would you say right now of the maturity of this concept? That is, how do I keep these fresh? How do I keep my opt-in fresh? Let me ask you directly, probably an improper questions, but you sell one of these products, so how many customers have you got, or at least how widespread is the idea of looking at insights of what my numbers are right now?
Yeah.
Is that new? Is it a new thing, or is it maturity everybody does?
It's not new, really. I mean, these services are pretty mature. Like I mentioned, there are different solutions out there in the market. It's not, the services existed. What is a little newer is, these operator APIs with SIM swap detection and tracking the portability events and when they happen. These are a little bit newer, but even that, a couple of years old, so not really new anymore, I would say. Either. What's new in some respects is the interest of some of the enterprises looking for this type of services and making sure that the data that they have is as accurate as possible. And again, some of them have been doing this successfully for many years, but some of them they realize the cost of messaging is increasing. So how can I make sure that when I have a budget to spend, I'm spending it by reaching those users that are still valid users, and they would take the action if it's a click-to-action type of activity. So there is definitely increased demand, not in the sense that the services are new, but in terms of enterprise realizing these are useful. Maybe I didn't care so much about this in the past. The messaging was cheaper. Now with the increase in prices, it's something that I should use and optimize my spend.
Interesting. As a, may say, the neutral party, as a representative MEF, maybe I have to point out that isn't it a bit disappointing, but it does work. Money talks a lot, because there you got the potential also not to communicate with your customers, or to get some of your customers really upset if you're talking to them, or if you haven't got their permission. But there has been money, and it is the question of you might be losing some of your balance, some of your investment, which is really driving the industry. And we've seen it somewhere else, some of the big things that happened recently, the announcement from Twitter and so on. But this as an industry is now a real topic. The question is the efficiency, the return on investment that we have on the platform is driving a lot of decision from the enterprises, and we are hearing it directly from them. Okay, so very interesting. So we're talking about enterprises now. So that was well, whose fault is it? And we have enterprises listening, but we got lots of CPaaS as well here. Is it the CPaaS responsibility to manage these opt-in, the list, or is it the enterprise?
I would say the opt-in obligation lies with the enterprise. So I think, yeah, they should be the ones primarily using this type of data, making sure that the data that they have is accurate. And when they send, the messages through their messaging partners, the data is already, clean to the extent that those users are reachable and they are users that actually still want to receive messages from that particular brand. Definitely, CPaaS providers, messaging providers, they can use, and many of them are using this type of solutions already. They are, I would say, probably more advanced, and they have a longer history with using this type of data versus enterprises, because for them, the angle is a little different. It's not necessarily about opt-in management. It's about optimizing the termination cost of SMS or whatever the channel might be.
Yeah. So you pointed something very, very right. It says, if you look at some of the regulations you told us, but it is clear, you are the enterprise, you need to have a right. You need to maintain the documentation in it to say that you have a right to talk to some of these customers. Yeah. But as we have some CPaaS in the room, I will ask you to be interactive with us again. So raise your hand if you think that it is the enterprise duty, legal or not, to look after the opt-in list. Any of them? Raise it. We've got one. We've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is growing. What? Oh, 7, 8, 9, 10 probably, because I missed some of you. Sorry, guys. Okay, quite a bit. What if you think that it is a CPaaS duty to raise your hand? 1, 2, fewer here, so I would definitely say it. There, I don't see as many. What? Oh, there's a third one there. Okay. Now, what if it's everybody? No, you're allowed to vote twice. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Definitely, it is the enterprise. That's a push. But I think the enterprises out there needs a lot of education, because some of this stuff, it's relatively new. While I think for the industry, it's not necessarily a novelty, but some of the enterprises don't think of that way, surprisingly. So I think maybe for the CPaaS in the industry, there is a reason to educate the market, to make sure that you manage and you tell them what is expected of them, or even to do it for them. I think there'll be another potential. Well, okay, so time back to reflect on these. What would you suggest is the most important thing to be done around this process? Do we need to educate, talk about market? Do we need to do something? What's the recipe? What should we do?
No, you definitely put it correctly here. Education, because enterprises, they're not telecom experts like we are. For us, we take this type of data points and services for granted most of the times. Enterprises might not know that there are ways to look at how can I keep my list of opted-in phone numbers fresh and accurate. So yeah, I think doing a good job there, educating the enterprises, reaching out and explaining what is available and how it helps is probably the right thing to do.
So how does it impact the brand overall? Because it's difficult to put a value on it, but a very big thing. Now it is time for me to open it up to questions or comments that you might have. You have been pretty interactive so far. You have a questions over there. Paul, I think. Introduce yourself anyway.
Hi, Dario. So it's Paul Eccles from Aegis. So, you're just saying about the CPaaS and about data. One of my comments would be, and a question, is to how many CPaaSs have data in their CRM systems that is accurate? Because that is one of the failings of many organizations, particularly sales organizations. It's one of the biggest issues. And so they're actually carrying data that is incorrect in the first place.
And the incorrect was because the enterprise gave them, or
they themselves do not maintain the data in the way that they should do. And it's a failure of many organizations, not just CPaaS. It happens across the world, with all sales organizations. Often Salesforce is not up to date. Could be 5 years out of date. So how are you actually going to achieve that?
it's like the old question, your CRM, we're talking about your CRM service, your database. What's your view? How many of them would have an update?
It's a shared responsibility, right? So, the fact that there are tools, it doesn't mean that, these tools are all compulsory. So it's up to, each organization, enterprise or CPaaS or what else to make use of these tools. And then, like I said, our role is to educate them. There is value in keeping the data fresh. But in the end, they have the choice as to how they want to implement it and how they want to use the data, or if at all.
All right. Do we have more questions in the room? More comments? You all agree that your company is doing something there. Let's try it out. Your company is doing something. Your company is, one way or another, actively managing your opt-in list. Raise your hand. We won't take a picture. There is no camera pointed towards you. But yeah, I can see one hand, two hands, some discussions happening there. It could be a reason about maybe something else. And two or three, is it two? Two companies that are saying that are actively doing that. Does it mean, raise your hands if you don't do it directly? Or raise your hands if you'd like to talk to your lawyer before you respond. Revealing, as it might be. That I think there is some discussion to have about it. We might have touched the second chapter of opt-in. Until now, the opt-in was really trying to work very hard in getting that opt-in, in getting that list. And only to be told now that there is more work, and a lot more work happening afterwards, might be a bit disappointing. Yet, it is a difference between eventually the success of a campaign or not, because it will transpire back into your ROI, your different success factors. Okay, so we've seen it. We talked about educations. We are probably platforms for some of education. Tell me, probably, what can we do as MEF? How can we help these to be better?
Well, I think this type of events and this type of forums are, perfect because, it's the forum where we can share this information.
Obviously, I paid him before, so he knew exactly what to say.
The answer came fast, yeah.
That's right.
No, joking aside, I think, education, information sharing, I think MEF is doing, brilliant job here. The events, but also the many webinars that are available, is probably not the only channel, but I think it's an important channel for, Indian companies like us to put the message out there, to put it like that.
And definitely, when we share with you some of those titles in the morning, some of this stuff looks, I don't want to say sexier because sexy is not, but something people want to talk about. There are some things that people are really excited because they're new and fresh. When I mentioned opt-in to some of the people before, they were not necessarily saying, oh, definitely, let's talk about opt-in. And yet, as you were saying, I think there is a duty in these things, a shared duty, but one for us as well, to refresh and maybe the tools have improved over time. Maybe the way we need to look at it needs to be refreshed and reconsidered somehow. Well, okay, so I won't want to keep it for too long, but I do like the interactions that we're having with you, and you seem not to, you're laughing even at some of the things, so do we? So let's try again once, and I promise this is going to be the last one. Does your view of opt-in and opt-in management, or has it changed, has it changed in the last 25, 26 minutes since we've been starting these? Raise your hand. Anything new? You haven't done a good job. It's all his fault. If you haven't seen it. So does it mean that it hasn't changed? It has not changed? Raise your hand. Three person have no change. Everybody else needs more chocolate and coffees. we will come and deliver very shortly. But unless somebody's asking for it. Unless there are any final words from you in the room? No? From you as well? Katalin, you've got the floor. What would you like to tell to convince everybody else that there's something new outside there?
I mean, yeah, there are, like I said earlier, these are not new services. There are different vendors, different type of solutions out there. So, if you're not using these type of services already, take a look. I think they bring value.
Oh, great. Now, thank you, and thanks for playing along with us, and for all of you for playing along. And as I say, this is an important topic. This is something that we feel it's really going to be coming back to us and to do in Czech, because the reality of what we do and how well we do it, we have to benchmark, understand, and improve. It seems quite a lot. So good luck to your work. Good luck to your work. And thanks again, Katalin, for being here with us.